The sun burned bright over the wide desert sky as Ethan Cole guided his tired horse through a stretch of dry land. Dust clung to his clothes and his hat shaded his weary eyes. He had been riding for 2 long days without finding a town, a ranch, or even a proper stream to drink from. He was a young man, strong but quiet, a wanderer who made his living fixing fences and helping on small farms. Life on the frontier was never easy, but he had learned how to survive. By the time the sun reached its highest point, his throat was dry and his horse moved slower with every step. Then between 2 red rock hills he noticed something unusual, a thin mist rising, shining under the sunlight. He followed it and soon heard the soft sound of running water. His heart lifted with hope. As he pushed through the brush, he found himself standing before a small hidden lake, surrounded by tall pine trees and smooth stones. The water looked clean, cool, and inviting. Ethan smiled and said softly to his horse, "Looks like we got lucky, old boy." He tied the reins to a branch and walked closer. The surface of the lake shone like glass, and for the first time in days he felt peace. He bent down to fill his canteen when he suddenly heard laughter, soft musical voices echoing from the far side of the water. At first he thought it might be his imagination. No one lived this far out, and he had not seen another traveler in days. But then through the light mist he saw movement. 3 young women standing near the rocks, their long dark hair shining under the sun. They were laughing together, splashing water at one another. The sight froze him in place. Ethan realized they were not settlers. Their clothes were different, woven blankets and beads, the kind worn by the Apache people. His heart began to pound. He did not mean to intrude. Quietly he turned to leave, careful not to make a sound. But as he stepped back, a dry twig snapped under his boot. Instantly the laughter stopped. 3 pairs of dark eyes turned toward him. One of the women pointed, and they began to shout in their language. Ethan raised his hands and said quickly, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." But before he could finish, they disappeared behind the rocks, and moments later, he heard feet running through the sand. He felt panic rise in his chest. He had no wish to anger the Apache. He had heard stories of what happened when outsiders disrespected their land. He started to untie his horse to leave when a voice called sharply from behind him, "You there, stop!" Ethan turned. The 3 women were standing a few steps away, now dressed modestly in long dresses of deer hide decorated with turquoise beads. They were beautiful in a natural way, their faces proud yet calm. The oldest of them, with long braids and eyes that seemed to hold both strength and sadness, stepped forward. She spoke clear English, though her accent carried the rhythm of the desert. "You saw us bathing," she said, her tone steady but serious. "By our law, you must marry us." Ethan blinked, unsure if he had heard her right. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I didn't mean to see anything. I didn't even know anyone was here." The woman crossed her arms. "It doesn't matter what you meant. You saw, our ways are old. The spirits guard the honor of our women. You broke that rule." Ethan tried to speak again. "Please, I didn't come to cause trouble. I'm just passing through." The second woman, younger and a bit playful, tilted her head. "He looks honest," she said softly to her sister. The third, the youngest, watched him quietly with wide, curious eyes, holding her blanket close. The eldest, who seemed to be their leader, said, "Our father is Chief Red Hawk. He will decide what to do with you." Ethan didn't like the sound of that, but he knew better than to argue. He nodded slowly and said, "All right, I'll come." He thought it best to show respect. Maybe if he explained himself, they would let him go. The 3 women led him through the forest path that wound between rocks and tall grass. Ethan's heart raced with every step. He could hear drums faintly in the distance echoing through the canyon. The sound grew louder as they neared a hidden valley. When they came into the open, Ethan saw a camp of Apache families, tents made of animal hides, fires burning, children playing near the stream. The people stopped what they were doing and looked toward him with sharp, questioning eyes. The eldest woman spoke to an older man sitting near the largest fire. He was tall, with silver hair tied back and feathers in his headband. His eyes were calm but powerful. Ethan knew at once this was Chief Red Hawk. The women explained in their native tongue what had happened. Ethan couldn't understand their words, but he could tell by their gestures and the looks on the faces around him that this was no small matter. When they finished, the chief looked at Ethan for a long moment before speaking. "You are a stranger," the chief said in a low, deep voice. "Our ways are not your ways. but you stepped on sacred ground. Do you know the rule you broke? Ethan swallowed hard. Sir, I didn't mean any harm. I was thirsty, looking for water. I didn't know anyone was here. The chief studied him for a moment. You saw what was not meant to be seen. In our tribe, that brings shame to women unless the man becomes their protector. Our law says he must marry. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. Marry? He said quietly, almost to himself. The chief nodded. You will stay in the camp until I decide if your heart is true. You will work among us, and we will see what kind of man you are. Ethan didn't argue. He knew that refusing might make things worse. He lowered his head and said, I'll stay. That night he was given a small tent near the edge of the camp. The people watched him with curiosity but not hatred. The 3 women visited briefly to bring him food, cornbread, roasted meat, and water. They said their names were Naya, Tala, and Suni. Naya was the oldest, strong-minded, and serious. Tala, the middle sister, had a playful spark in her eyes. Suni, the youngest, was shy but kind. As the fire burned low, Ethan sat alone, thinking about how quickly his day had changed. That morning he had been a free man wandering the land, and now he was under tribal law, possibly facing marriage to 3 women he had just met. Yet deep inside he didn't feel anger, only confusion and a strange respect for their honesty and courage. He remembered how proud they stood by the lake, how they faced him without fear. They were not weak or frightened. They were strong and dignified, following their people's ways. He realized that perhaps this was what the old frontier was truly about. Not just land and freedom, but learning to understand lives different from one's own. Before he lay down to rest, he looked up at the night sky. The stars stretched endlessly over the desert. He wondered what tomorrow would bring, what the chief would decide, and why fate had brought him to that hidden lake in the first place. As the drums from the camp slowly faded and the cool wind brushed through the tent, Ethan whispered softly, "Maybe the spirits had a reason." He closed his eyes, not knowing that this strange turn of destiny was only the beginning of a story that would tie his life forever to the Apache people and to the 3 women who had changed his path under the Wild West sky. The morning sun rose slowly over the canyon, painting the red rocks with shades of gold. Ethan woke up to the sound of drums and soft voices outside his small tent. For a moment he didn't remember where he was. Then it came back to him. The lake, the 3 Apache women, and the chief's words. "You will stay until we know your heart." He sat up, stretched his sore arms, and stepped outside. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the smell of wood smoke and sage. Around him, the Apache camp was already alive. Women were cooking by the fire, children were chasing each other near the stream, and men were working on horses or sharpening tools. Everything moved with quiet purpose. A young boy ran past him, laughing, and an old woman nearby gave him a curious look. Ethan nodded politely. He felt like an outsider in a world that moved to a rhythm he didn't yet understand. He was about to return to his tent when he heard a calm voice behind him. "You should eat before you work." It was Naya, the eldest of the 3 sisters. She carried a wooden bowl with roasted corn and bread made from ground maize. Her long braids were tied with turquoise beads, and her eyes looked thoughtful, not unkind. Ethan thanked her. "You didn't have to bring this," she gave a small smile. "You are in our care now. If you are to stay, you must live as we do." He sat near the fire and ate slowly while Naya watched. The food was simple but warm, and it eased his empty stomach. After a while, she said, "My father, Chief Red Hawk, wishes to speak with you after the morning meal. He has work for you." Ethan nodded, feeling a little uneasy but ready to do what was asked. When the sun climbed higher, Naya led him through the camp. People stopped what they were doing to watch. The Apache were proud and cautious by nature, and though some looked curious, none were unfriendly. Children whispered behind their hands, calling him the pale man who saw the sacred lake. At the center of the camp, near the biggest fire pit, sat Chief Red Hawk. He was speaking to several men, and when Ethan arrived, the group grew quiet. The chief motioned for him to come closer. "You have stayed the night in our land," the chief said, his voice deep and steady. "Now you must work among us. A man's worth is known not by his words, but by what his hands can do." Ethan agreed without hesitation. "I'll do whatever you need, Chief," the chief nodded. "You will help care for the horses. Our people respect those who respect animals. My daughter Tala will show you what to do." Tala, the second sister, stepped forward. She was younger than Naya, with lively eyes that seemed to catch every detail. Her smile was small but teasing. "I hope you know how to listen," she said lightly. "Our horses understand more than most men." Ethan couldn't help but smile back. "Then I'll try not to disappoint them." For the rest of the morning, Tala guided him around the camp's corral. The Apache horses were lean and fast, their coats shining in the sunlight. Tala moved among them gracefully, whispering to them in her language. Ethan followed her instructions carefully, brushing their coats, refilling water troughs, and fixing a broken fence post. At first, the horses shied away from him, but soon they grew calm. One brown mare even nudged his hand gently. Tala noticed and said, "She trusts you." "That is rare. Horses know the heart better than people." Ethan nodded. "Maybe she knows I'm just trying to make things right." Tala's expression softened. "You didn't mean to see us at the lake, did you?" Ethan shook his head. "No, I swear it. I just wanted to drink water." Tala looked thoughtful. "Our law is strict, but my sister Naya only follows what the spirits demand. She is not cruel." "I don't think any of you are," Ethan said quietly. By sunset, Ethan's arms were sore from work, but he felt good. The Apache men had watched him closely all day, and some began to nod in quiet approval. Even the old man who had frowned earlier gave him a slight grin when Ethan helped lift a heavy water barrel. That night, the tribe gathered around the fire for food and stories. The smell of roasted meat filled the air. Naya sat beside her father, Tala and Suni nearby. When Ethan approached, unsure if he was welcome, the chief gestured for him to sit. "You worked well," Red Hawk said. "A man's spirit shows in his labor. But strength is not all. We also test patience and honor." Ethan nodded. "I understand." The chief leaned forward. "Tomorrow you will hunt with our men. We will see if you can respect the land as we do." Ethan agreed. He didn't want to fail these people who had shown him both suspicion and kindness. Later, as the firelight flickered, Suni, the youngest sister, quietly offered him a carved wooden cup of water. She was shy, barely speaking above a whisper. "You look tired," she said. "The desert takes much from strangers." Ethan smiled gently. "You're kind." "I'll be fine. I've slept under harsher skies." Suni nodded but didn't leave right away. "When I was little," she said softly, "our people believed strangers who came by accident were sent by the wind spirits. Maybe they sent you." Ethan didn't know what to say. The thought warmed him, though he didn't quite believe in fate. "Maybe," he said with a small smile. That night, as the camp grew quiet and the moon rose high, Ethan lay awake thinking about the three sisters. Naya was strong and wise beyond her years. Tala had laughter behind her eyes but hid it carefully. And Suni was gentle and kind, untouched by pride or fear. He couldn't understand why the spirits or luck had chosen him to meet them. At dawn, he joined the hunters. They moved silently through the forest, bows in hand. The Apache men were quick and skillful, reading signs in the dirt and wind. Ethan followed closely, copying their quiet steps. When they spotted a deer drinking at the stream, one of the men signaled him to wait. Ethan held his breath, his heart steady. He remembered the chief's words about respect. Instead of firing too quickly, he waited until the deer turned, allowing a clean shot. When he finally raised his rifle and fired, the sound echoed through the trees. The deer fell instantly. The men nodded approvingly. The leader, named Lone Hawk, said, "You did not waste the animal's spirit. You waited for the right time. That shows patience." When they returned to camp, the tribe welcomed them with cheers. Chief Red Hawk looked pleased. "You hunt with care," he said to Ethan. "That is the Apache way." As evening came, the women prepared the food. Ethan helped carry wood for the fire, and Naya watched him quietly. When he looked her way, she said, "My father respects you now." "That is not easily earned." Ethan was surprised. "I'm grateful for that. I didn't come here to cause trouble." Naya's gaze softened. "Sometimes trouble finds us to test our hearts. Maybe this happened for a reason." He looked into her eyes and saw something he hadn't seen before. Trust. The night ended with laughter and stories around the fire. Tala told a tale about a coyote who tried to steal from the gods and ended up stealing the moon instead. Everyone laughed and Ethan joined in. It was the first time he felt like he truly belonged. Even for a moment. As the stars filled the sky, he looked around at the faces glowing in the firelight. Naya's calm strength, Tala's teasing smile, Suni's quiet grace, and the chief's proud eyes. For the first time since he had arrived, Ethan didn't feel like a prisoner or a stranger. He felt like a man who had wandered into a new life, one written by fate and guided by unseen hands. The desert wind whispered through the pines, carrying voices of the past. Ethan looked at the sky and thought, maybe I'm meant to be here. The days in the Apache camp passed quickly for Ethan. What began as an accident by the lake had turned into a strange new life filled with work, learning, and quiet respect. Every sunrise brought something new to understand about the tribe, their ways, their rules, and the deep connection they had with nature. Ethan had always been a man of the land. He grew up on a small ranch, herding cattle and fixing fences. But here he learned something different. The Apache didn't just survive off the land, they lived with it. Every tree, every river, every bird had meaning to them. They believed the earth was alive and spoke to those who listened. Chief Red Hawk had been watching him carefully. Though he was strict, there was fairness in his eyes. After a week, the chief called Ethan to his fire. The camp grew quiet as Ethan approached. The flames danced in the cool night wind, and the chief's face glowed in the light. "You have worked hard," Red Hawk said slowly. "You respect our people and our land. But respect must be proven through courage. If you are to stay among us, you must pass a test of the heart." Ethan stood still, not afraid but curious. "What kind of test, Chief?" The chief pointed to the dark cliffs rising beyond the camp. "There is a white eagle that nests high above the canyon. Its feather is a sacred sign. No one may take it by force. Only a man of good spirit can bring one back. If you can do this, the spirits will know your heart is true." Ethan understood what it meant. The test wasn't about strength. It was about patience, bravery, and respect. He nodded firmly. "I'll do it." At dawn, the tribe gathered to see him off. Tala handed him a small pouch of dried meat and water. "Be careful," she said with a faint smile. "The eagle tests every man who climbs those rocks." Naya placed a turquoise bead in his hand. "For protection," she said. "The spirits favor those who climb with humility." Suni, the youngest, didn't speak much but quietly gave him a small leather cord tied in a knot. "If you're in danger, hold it. It means someone's thinking of you." Ethan smiled gratefully and set off toward the cliffs. The sun was already strong when he began his climb. The path was steep, filled with loose stones and sharp edges. Each step tested his balance and strength. But he didn't rush. He moved slowly, steady as the chief had taught, listening to the sound of the wind, watching the way the rocks crumbled, feeling the heat of the stone beneath his hands. Halfway up, he stopped to rest near a ledge. Below him, the camp looked small, almost peaceful. Above him, he saw the eagle's nest, a wide circle of branches and feathers near the top of the cliff. The great bird circled high above, its wings stretched wide, proud and untamed. Ethan didn't try to climb directly to the nest. Instead, he sat quietly on the rock and waited. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky. The eagle soared, watching him with sharp eyes. He spoke softly, almost to himself. "I'm not here to harm you, friend. I just need to prove my heart." The wind picked up, carrying his words away. Then, just as the sun began to dip low, something strange happened. The eagle swooped down, not toward him but past him, and as it did, a single white feather drifted loose, spinning slowly through the air. Ethan reached out and caught it before it touched the ground. For a moment, he just stared at it. The feather glowed softly in the fading sunlight. He knew then that this was no ordinary test. It was a gift, a sign that he had been accepted. When he returned to the camp, the people gathered around in silence. Ethan walked up to the chief and placed the feather before him. Red Hawk studied it carefully, then looked into Ethan's eyes. "You did not steal it," he said. "It was given to you." "The eagle knows the heart of men. You have earned its trust." The chief stood and raised his hands. "From this day, Ethan Cole is no longer an outsider. He walks in peace among our people." The tribe cheered softly and the women smiled. Naya's expression held pride. Tala clapped her hands in joy and Suni's eyes shone with relief. That night the camp was filled with warmth. The people danced around the fire, drums beating in rhythm with the earth. Ethan sat near the flames, feeling the joy around him. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't lonely. Tala came to sit beside him. "You did it," she said. "The eagle doesn't give its feather easily." Ethan smiled. "Maybe it saw I wasn't trying to take what wasn't mine." She laughed softly. "That's a lesson many men never learn. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sparks rise into the night sky. Then Naya joined them, her calm voice breaking the quiet. My father respects you now. But remember, earning respect is only the beginning. Keeping it takes a lifetime. Ethan nodded. I'll do my best. The next few days passed peacefully. Ethan worked alongside the Apache men, helping build fences, fixing saddles, and carrying water. He listened to the stories told around the fire, tales of the first warriors, of spirits who shaped the rivers, and of love that outlasted lifetimes. The more he listened, the more he felt part of something bigger than himself. One evening, as the sky turned orange, Ethan was sitting by the stream washing his hands when Suni approached quietly. She sat beside him, dipping her fingers into the cool water. You look at peace, she said gently. I feel it, he replied. Back where I came from, there's always noise and worry. Here, everything seems to have meaning. Suni smiled shyly. Maybe that's why the spirits led you to us. Ethan looked at her and nodded. Maybe so. Just then, Tala appeared behind them with a playful grin. Careful, Suni. He might believe you and never leave. Suni blushed and turned away while Tala laughed. Ethan couldn't help smiling at their teasing. Life in the camp had become something he never expected. Simple, calm, but full of hidden strength. That night, the chief called another gathering. The stars filled the sky and the fire flickered against the canyon walls. Chief Redhawk stood and spoke to his people. The stranger who came among us has proven himself, he said. But a man's heart is not tested only by danger. It is tested by loyalty. Storms come and go, and we will see who stands firm when the winds rise. Ethan listened carefully, not realizing how soon those words would come true. Later, as he walked back to his tent, he passed by the three sisters standing near the edge of camp. Naya was speaking quietly to Tala and Suni, her face serious. When she saw Ethan, she gave a small nod. Rest well, Ethan Cole. Tomorrow may test you again. He didn't know what she meant, but he nodded back respectfully. When he lay down under the clear night sky, he thought about the journey so far. A simple mistake by a lake had brought him to a world filled with strange beauty, lessons, and unexpected kindness. He thought of the eagle's feather hanging above the chief's tent, glowing faintly in the firelight. He didn't know what the next test would be, but deep down he felt ready. His heart had begun to change in ways he couldn't explain. The Wild West had always been a land of hardship, but among the Apache, he had found something worth fighting for. The wind whispered through the trees, and somewhere far away the white eagle cried in the night. Ethan listened to the sound and smiled to himself. Maybe the spirits really were watching over him after all. Days passed peacefully after Ethan's test with the white eagle. The Apache camp was calm, filled with the songs of birds and the smell of pine trees. Ethan had started to feel like one of them. The men spoke to him without suspicion now, and the women smiled when he passed by. Children ran to greet him, laughing and asking to ride his horse. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt like he had a home. He spent most of his days helping repair tents, collecting firewood, and tending the horses. He had learned enough Apache words to speak simply, and the people seemed pleased by his effort. Every evening, when the red sun sank behind the canyon, he would sit near the stream and listen to the water. It reminded him of that first day, the lake, the voices, and how his whole life had changed in one moment. Sometimes he saw Naya walking near the cliffs with her father. She was always calm, graceful, and wise beyond her years. Tala, on the other hand, liked to tease him whenever he made a mistake. And Suni, the youngest, was gentle and quiet, always bringing him water or herbs when he worked too hard. Slowly, their friendship grew stronger, built on respect and kindness. One evening, dark clouds began to gather over the desert. The wind blew hard through the trees, carrying the smell of rain. The sky turned gray and the air grew heavy. The tribe started to prepare for a storm. Women tied down tents and men secured supplies near the higher ground. Chief Redhawk looked up at the sky and said, "The river will rise tonight. Stay close to the camp." Ethan helped Tala move the horses into a sheltered area near the rocks. "This storm looks bad," he said. Tala nodded. "The mountain winds are angry tonight. We must be careful." Thunder rolled across the sky. Lightning flashed, bright and sharp, and rain began to pour down. Within minutes, the calm camp turned into chaos. The river that ran through the valley began to swell. The sound of rushing water grew louder and louder until it became a roar. Ethan and several others tried to build a small barrier of stones near the camp to slow the flood, but the force of the water was too strong. The current swept through the lower part of the camp, knocking over pots, washing away firewood, and tearing loose ropes from the tents. People shouted and ran to higher ground. Naya was helping her father save sacred items from their tent. Tala was guiding horses to safety. But in the confusion, no one noticed that Suni had gone down toward the river to rescue a young goat trapped by the flood. By the time Ethan heard her cry, the water had already reached her knees. He looked down the slope and saw her struggling near a fallen branch. The river pulled hard at her legs and she lost her footing. Without a second thought, Ethan threw off his coat and ran toward her. The water was cold and wild, pushing against him with every step. He could hear the tribe shouting behind him, but their voices were drowned by the storm. "Suni, hold on!" he shouted. The young woman clung to the branch, her face pale with fear. The current was pulling her farther from the shore. Ethan waded deeper until the water reached his chest. A wave hit him hard, nearly knocking him over, but he pushed forward with all his strength. His arms ached, his boots slipped, but he didn't stop. When he reached her, she was too weak to move. He grabbed her arm and held her close. "I've got you," he said firmly. "Don't let go." Suni nodded weakly, her voice trembling. "The water, it's too strong." Ethan looked around. The nearest dry ground was several yards away, but between them was a swirl of rocks and broken branches. He took a deep breath and began to move sideways, step by step, fighting the current. The water tore at his clothes, but he kept going. At one point, his foot slipped on a stone and they both went under. For a few terrifying seconds, the world was only water and darkness. Then Ethan's hand found the same branch Suni had held before, and he pulled them both up, gasping for air. "Almost there," he said, coughing. "Hold on to me." With one final effort, he pushed forward through the water until his feet touched solid ground. He lifted Suni in his arms and carried her out of the river, away from the danger. They both fell to the ground, soaked and exhausted as the rain poured down around them. When the tribe saw them, they rushed to help. Tala covered Suni with a blanket, and Naya checked her breathing. Chief Redhawk came forward, his eyes filled with concern. "She's alive," Naya said, relief in her voice. Ethan stood there, shivering and breathless. His hands were scraped and his arm was bleeding from a cut he hadn't even noticed. But he didn't care. Suni was safe. The chief placed a strong hand on his shoulder. "You risked your life for my daughter," he said solemnly. "Few men would have done that." Ethan looked down modestly. "She was in danger. I couldn't stand by and watch." Redhawk nodded. "You have the heart of a warrior and the soul of a protector. The spirits will remember this." That night, after the storm had passed and the rain turned to a light drizzle, the tribe built a fire to dry their clothes. The camp was damaged, but no one was lost. People gathered around, grateful for safety. Suni sat near the fire, wrapped in a warm blanket. Her face was pale, but her eyes were soft and full of gratitude. When Ethan walked past, she reached out and held his hand gently. "You saved me," she whispered. "I owe you my life," he smiled kindly. "You don't owe me anything. You'd have done the same for anyone else." Suni shook her head. "Not everyone would have fought the river. The spirits chose you for a reason." As she spoke, Naya and Tala approached, both wearing expressions of quiet pride. Naya said, "Our father has already decided. You are no longer a stranger here." "Ethan Cole, you are family," Tala added with a small grin. "Now, you really can't run away from us." Everyone laughed softly, and the sound brought warmth back into the night. The storm had taken much, but it had also brought something new, a bond sealed not by law but by courage and heart. When the fire burned low, Chief Redhawk stood before the people. "Tonight we give thanks. A man who came as an outsider saved one of our own. The spirits have shown their will." The storm tested him and he did not fall. The people nodded in agreement. Ethan felt humbled. He didn't know what to say, so he simply bowed his head. As the stars reappeared in the sky, the chief looked toward him and said, "Soon, we will speak of what comes next. The spirits may have already chosen your path." Ethan looked across the fire at Naya, Tala, and Suni. They were smiling, their faces calm and full of light. He felt a strange peace in his heart, a peace that told him he was exactly where he was meant to be. When he lay down later that night, the air smelled of wet earth and pine. The storm had passed, but the memory of it remained. He thought about Suni's hand gripping his, about the strength that had carried him through the flood, and about the tribe that now called him one of their own. He closed his eyes, listening to the soft murmur of the stream nearby, and whispered to himself, "Maybe this is what fate looks like." And as the white eagle flew quietly above the canyon, its wings catching the moonlight, Ethan Cole finally slept, no longer a wanderer, but a man whose courage had tied his heart to the Wild West forever. The next morning after the great storm, the air was clean and cool. Mist rose from the wet ground and sunlight sparkled on the leaves as if the world had been washed new. The Apache camp was quiet. Smoke rose slowly from small fires and people moved gently, cleaning and rebuilding what the flood had damaged. Ethan woke up early. His body still ached from fighting the river, but his heart felt light. When he stepped outside, he saw Suni sitting near the fire with a blanket around her shoulders. She smiled softly when she noticed him. "You should rest more," Ethan said kindly. Suni shook her head. "I've rested enough." "You're the one who should rest. You fought the river all night." Ethan chuckled quietly. "Maybe I'm just too stubborn to drown." Suni smiled again, and there was a quiet warmth between them. She reached into her blanket and pulled out a small feather, white as snow. "This came to me in my dream," she said softly. "The eagle blessed you again." Ethan looked at it in surprise. "You really believe that?" She nodded. "Yes, the spirits saw your heart last night. They know you belong here." Before Ethan could reply, Chief Redhawk called him from across the camp. The chief stood near the great fire, his face calm and serious. "Ethan Cole," he said, "the storm has passed, but its meaning remains. The spirits have tested you, and you have proven yourself worthy." Ethan bowed his head respectfully. "Thank you, Chief. I only did what was right." The chief looked at his daughters, Naya, Tala, and Suni, who stood beside him. "When you came to our land, you were a stranger. You saw what was sacred to us, and our law demanded that you must marry my daughters to protect their honor. But laws are only words unless they are filled with meaning. Now, through your actions, you have shown that you are not a man of empty words." The people of the tribe gathered around in silence, listening carefully. Redhawk continued, "You have brought no harm. You have brought help. You have risked your life for our family. The spirits have spoken clearly. The bond that began by law must now continue by choice." He turned to his daughters. "Do you accept him now, not by rule, but by heart?" Naya stepped forward first. Her voice was calm and strong. "When we first met him, I thought he was careless, a man who did not understand our ways. But he has learned. He respects our people. I see now that his heart is good." Then Tala spoke, her eyes bright. "He worked beside us, laughed with us, and protected our home. I have seen few men who carry courage without pride. He has earned his place here." Finally, Suni came closer, her voice gentle but full of feeling. "He saved my life when the river tried to take it. I will never forget that. To me, he is family." The chief nodded, his eyes warm with pride. He turned to Ethan. "You came to us by accident, but you stayed by choice. If your heart accepts, we will hold a ceremony to join your life with ours under the red sky." Ethan looked around him. The people, the land, the 3 women who had changed his destiny. He thought of the days he had spent here, the laughter, the lessons, the peace he had never known before. Slowly he nodded. "Yes, Chief, my heart accepts." The tribe cheered softly, their voices rising with joy. The chief raised his hands to the sky. "Then let it be so. Tonight, under the setting sun, we will celebrate not just a union but the joining of 2 worlds, the stranger and the Apache, now one family." All day the camp was filled with movement. Women prepared food, roasting corn and wild meat. Children gathered flowers from the fields. Men decorated the fire pit with stones shaped like an eagle's wings. Ethan helped wherever he could, though the people insisted he should rest. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, the ceremony began. The air was filled with the deep sound of drums and the soft songs of the women. The wind carried the scent of sage and smoke. Chief Redhawk stood tall before the fire, his feathers shining in the evening light. The 3 sisters stood beside Ethan, dressed in beautiful traditional clothing made of deer hide and turquoise beads. Their faces glowed softly in the sunset. The chief spoke. "Long ago, our ancestors said that life is a circle. Every meeting, every loss, every choice is part of that circle. Tonight, a new circle begins. A man who came from far away now becomes part of our story." He looked at Ethan. "Do you promise to walk with respect among our people, to protect them as your own family?" Ethan placed his hand over his heart. "I promise, Chief. This land has given me a new life. I'll honor it with all I have." Then the chief turned to his daughters. "Do you accept this man as one who will walk beside you in peace and trust?" Naya, Tala, and Suni answered together, "We accept." The people clapped and cheered. The drums grew louder and the fire rose higher. It wasn't just a ceremony of law, it was one of love, respect, and unity. The red glow of the setting sun bathed them all in warmth as if the sky itself blessed the moment. Afterward, the tribe celebrated with laughter and music. People danced around the fire and Ethan joined them, unsure at first, but smiling as the rhythm carried him. Tala taught him a few steps, laughing when he got them wrong. Naya watched proudly, and Suni stood nearby, her eyes shining with quiet happiness. Later, when the fire burned low and the stars appeared, Ethan sat near the edge of the camp, looking out at the vast desert. The moonlight spread across the land like silver dust. He felt someone sit beside him and turned to see Naya. "You look at peace," she said softly. Ethan smiled. "I never thought I'd find a place where I belonged. But here everything feels right." Naya nodded. "You have learned that belonging doesn't come from blood or land, it comes from the heart." Tala joined them, tossing a small stone into the fire. "You changed our lives, Ethan Cole. The day we met you, I thought the spirits were playing a trick. Now I see they were giving us a gift." Then Suni came close, holding the small white feather she had shown him earlier. She placed it in his hand. "Keep this," she whispered. "It means the spirits walk with you." Ethan looked at the feather and smiled. "I'll keep it always." The night grew quiet. The people slowly drifted to sleep, their laughter fading into the soft hum of crickets. Ethan stayed awake a little longer, looking up at the stars. He thought of the long road that had brought him here, the dust, the loneliness, the lake, the laughter, the storm, and the courage that had tied his heart to this place. He whispered softly, "Maybe I didn't find this place by chance. Maybe it found me." Years later, travelers who rode through the canyon would speak of a ranch hidden near a silver lake. They said a fair man lived there, strong and kind, with 3 wise and beautiful Apache women. They worked the land together, raised horses, and helped anyone who came their way. The people who visited said the land around their home always stayed green, even when the rest of the desert was dry, as if the spirits themselves protected it. And whenever someone asked Ethan how he came to live there, he would smile and say in his quiet way, "It started with a lake and a lesson I never forgot." He would look toward the red horizon where the sun touched the earth and add softly, "Sometimes, fate finds you in the most unexpected place." The story of Ethan Cole and the 3 Apache sisters became a tale told by campfires and travelers across the Wild West. Some called it a legend, others called it destiny. But for those who knew the truth, it was simply the story of a man who came as a stranger, stayed as family, and found love under the endless red sky.